Puerto Rico is about to rank below Iran when it comes to government transparency. Let that marinate for a second there. A U.S. territory with more than 3 million U.S. citizens is about to have less access to public records than the Islamic Republic of Iran. Oh, but that's just in Puerto Rico, man. Like, why would I worry about that in the mainland? That would never happen here in the mainland. In the 1950s and 60s, pharmaceutical companies needed to test high-dose birth control pills. Where do you think they went? Take a wild guess. They tested these pills on Puerto Rican women, many of whom weren't fully informed about the side effects or the risks. Some women were given doses 3 times higher than what we use today. And when it worked, they rolled it out on the mainland. Puerto Rican women were used as guinea pigs so that American women could have access to contraception. Why would they do this, you ask? It was part of a larger population control agenda. Puerto Rico was painted as overpopulated, with politicians and economists arguing that high birth rates were the reason for Puerto Rico's economic problems. They claimed that too many Puerto Ricans would drain resources away from productive investment. It was a convenient narrative. Blame poverty on Puerto Ricans having too many children instead of addressing the actual colonial economic structure. And guess what? Once they perfected these population control tactics in Puerto Rico, they exported them. The same arguments about overpopulation causing poverty instead of addressing systemic inequality got used to justify sterilization programs targeting poor women, black women, indigenous women, and women with disabilities across the mainland. In 1970, Congress passed the Family Planning Services and Population Research Act, which allocated millions for contraceptive programs, including sterilization. Federally funded sterilization increased nearly 300% between 1970 and 1977. And here's what I'm really trying to get at. Between 1970 and 1976, between 25 to 50% of Native American women of childbearing age were sterilized. The Indian Health Service sterilized thousands of indigenous women without proper consent, sometimes after telling them the procedures were reversible, sometimes while they were under sedation after giving birth, sometimes without even telling them what was being done. At a county hospital in Los Angeles in the 70s, hundreds of Mexican American women were coerced into tubal ligations. More than 100,000 Black, Latino, and indigenous women were sterilized through these federally funded programs. In North Carolina, forced sterilization of Black women continued into the early 1970s. Puerto Rico was the laboratory where they figured out how to package sterilization as economic policy and women's health care. Then, they scaled it up and deployed it against every marginalized community they could target in the mainland. In the 1960s and 70s, before they dropped Agent Orange all over Vietnam, where do you think they tested it? Yeah, you're right. They tested it in the Puerto Rican forests. They wanted to see what this chemical weapon would do to vegetation, and spoiler alert, it fucking destroyed it. Then they used it in Southeast Asia, where it poisoned an entire generation. But hey, at least they tested it on a US soil, right, before they shipped it out there, and I'm sure that has had no negative health effects on the population of the island. Or any other type of weapons testing, right? I'm sure that has no negative side effects. And here's the one that scares me the most, right? Because for 50 years, the FBI and Puerto Rican police kept secret files, carpetas, on over 100,000 Puerto Ricans. Teachers, union members, students, and independence activists. If you even thought about Puerto Rican sovereignty, you got a file. This was illegal surveillance on a massive scale. The FBI's counterintelligence program treated Puerto Rican activists like spies, like enemies of the state. And you know what? A lot of those surveillance tactics, that infrastructure of spying on citizens, it didn't stay in Puerto Rico. And I'm sure that keeping a master file on every single US citizen is something the government doesn't want. They would never want to do that. They would never want to do that. Right? This is just the tip of the iceberg of things that were first tested on the island and then brought somewhere else. But let's get back on track, okay? Senate Bill 63, Project 63, whatever fucking sanitized name you want to call it. This bill amends Puerto Rico's Transparency and Expedited Procedure for Access to Public Information Act. Sounds boring. And that's what they want you to fucking think, because this is not boring shit. This is not boring at all. Here's what the bill actually does. The bill would double the response deadline for government agencies to provide public information from 10 to 20 business days. With extensions, this could potentially stretch to 40 or even 50 days. That's almost 2 months of waiting and hoping they would actually give you what you asked for. It also stipulates that government agencies are not required to create new documents to fulfill an information request. So, what does this actually mean? If their information exists but isn't in the exact format you need, tough luck, Buster. You know what? It's in a mountain of it's in a fucking pile of unsorted documents over there. Go fucking look for it. You wanted it. Why would we want to organize this shit so you can actually read it? Go fucking look for that shit. Somewhere in that pile. And then the most controversial thing, in my opinion at least, is that it would require that all agency officials be notified whenever a document is requested. Now, why does this matter? Well, because now every bureaucrat in the chain gets a heads up that someone's asking questions, right? More time to coordinate responses, more time to figure out how to say no, more time to make sure everyone's stories matches up. You know, give those politicians a little heads up so they can make up a little fairy tale about something. So what does this mean in practice, right? Well, you want to know where your tax money's being spent? Well, that just got harder. You want to see the contracts the government signed with private companies, which pretty big topic in Puerto Rico, right? Well, that just got fucking harder. Want to investigate corruption or mismanagement? No, there's no corruption in Puerto Rico. No corruption at all. Stop asking questions, right? Right? You want to hold your elected official accountable? Just got a lot harder, right? The existing law 141/2019 wasn't perfect, but it was a step in the right direction, right? This bill walks that back like hard. This bill was authored by Senate President Thomas Rivera Schatz, who, holy shit, this guy has so many fucking skeletons in the closet. You'd think he just really loves Halloween, or he's a med student maybe. I don't know, but isn't it convenient that a politician with a questionable track record, he's pushing this bill that makes it harder to investigate politicians, right? That's real convenient. The bill still needs to pass the House of Representatives, but given how it was rushed through the Senate with no public hearing, should we really be concerned about what's going to happen next? Should we really? Maybe you're watching this from Florida, California, Texas. You're thinking, okay, this sucks for Puerto Rico, right? But what does it have to do with me? Everything. It has everything to do with you, right? Like I said before, Puerto Rico is a perfect testing ground. Puerto Ricans are U.S. citizens, but they can't vote for president. They have no voting representation in Congress. When something happens in Puerto Rico, the mainland media barely covers it. There's less accountability, there's less oversight, and less ability to fight back. So when politicians and corporations want to try something new, something that might be too controversial or too obvious to roll out in Florida or New York or something, where do they go? All right? There's a track record of this happening, right? The birth control pills, the mass surveillance tactics, which I know the U.S. has done that a lot throughout its history, but especially with what's happening now with a certain country that we're not allowed to criticize, I'm seeing a lot of parallels here, okay? Right? But this is like a beta test. Yeah, Senate Bill 63 is like a beta test. If this works in Puerto Rico, you bet your ass that some state legislator in your state is looking at this and going like, we could do that too, right? Some governor facing scandals is going to think like, we should make a FOIA request harder. Yeah, let's add more delays, more exceptions, more ways to say no. We're living in an era where trust in institutions is at an all-time low. And the answer should be more transparency, not less. But we're watching the opposite happen, okay? Governments are closing ranks, hiding information, making it harder for citizens to know what's being done in their name. And it started in Puerto Rico, because it's always in Puerto Rico, right? If they can strip transparency from, might I add, 3 million American citizens, because Puerto Rico is the US. You know, I know a lot of people don't like that fact, but we're part of the US. It's 3 million of us fucking living there, right? If they can strip transparency from 3 million American citizens and they can get away with it, they can do it anywhere. They can do it in a town. They can do it in your town, in your state, in your county, the whole country. So what can be done, right? Look, I'm not gonna stand here and pretend there's some magic solution, especially in Puerto Rico, right? Puerto Rico's political system, whatever, it's fucking cooked. It's fucking cooked. Our politicians are bought and paid for. The same people who've been failing us for decades are still in power, right? The corruption runs so deep that trying to fight it, it's like trying to catch a fly with chopsticks. I know some people are really good at that, but you get the point, right? So here's what I can tell you, right? Pay attention. Pay attention. That's it. That's the first step. The fact that you watch this video means you know something most Americans don't. Because I'm not saying this shit on the news anywhere, right? When you see your state trying to restrict transparency, you recognize it at least. And connect the dots as well. When similar legislation shows up in your state, and I'm sure it will show up in your state, you'll know it's not an isolated incident. It's a pattern. It's a strategy. And maybe, just maybe, you'll be able to stop it before it passes. So, you know, support the people fighting, right? There's journalists in Puerto Rico, activists, organizations. They're trying to hold the line, right? They're fighting with limited resources and zero political power, because it's just fucking cooked over there, right? They share their work. They deserve to be heard, even if, especially if the government won't listen. And you want to know what's crazy? Actually, the reason I found out about this wasn't because of a Puerto Rican journalist or the Puerto Rican news or whatever. It was on a guy on Instagram called Street Gonzo who made a video about it. And that's how I found out about this. And I searched it up and I'm like, holy shit, this is fucking real. They're actually doing this. So I'll, shout out to him, I guess. Right. So like I said before, if Puerto Rico becomes less transparent than fucking Iran and nobody on the mainland notices, nobody cares, it's gonna spread. It'll be normalized. It'll be the new standard. But if people pay attention, if they see this for what it is, right, a test run for authoritarian governance, maybe it stops here. Maybe your state doesn't follow suit. Maybe when your representative tries to pull the same thing, you'll be ready. Vote that motherfucker out of office. You know, I know it feels like in the US, voting doesn't feel as powerful as it probably should be, but on the local level, it definitely is. It definitely does make a difference. And that's the most important thing, because if your communities are strong, they're ready to stand up against what's wrong, we'll be fine. We'll be fine. So the question is, are you paying attention, right? Is your head in the sand? If it is, get the fuck out of there. Why are you sticking your head in the sand? You're not an ostrich. Are those the ones that stick their head in? I don't fucking know. Whatever. History has shown us time and time again, and I'm not just talking about Puerto Rico here. I'm talking about in general that it starts like this. This is how it starts, and then it's just a slippery slope. So, anyways, I don't want to ramble on for longer. So, thank you for watching, and yeah, we'll see where this ends. Bye.
Is one of the finest islands I ever saw. All that man could ever want is here. An English sailor wrote these words 200 years ago, and we must agree with him that our island does possess great beauty.